Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this episode, we'll be reviewing the new push-pull rally shifter from Ascher Racing. Now, being able to use the same type of shifting hardware that a lot of the World Rallycross cars are using delivers more immersion for all the rally-style sim racing fans out there. Martin Ascher is already quite well known for designing and delivering top-flight sim racing products. We'll be putting this shifter through the SRG review process to see if he has another winner on his hands. So let's get to it. Now for a closer look at the Ascher shifter. First off, you can see it's a nice compact integrated unit here, and it is a magnetic activated shifter. And I'm just kind of pressing on this back plate here. The design is, of course, going to be a push-pull, as you well know. And you'll be pushing it and then, or pushing it rather and pulling it depending on your orientation there. And yeah, I've never used one of these before, and I'm looking forward to giving this a go. It's very nicely put together, as usual from Ascher Racing. We wouldn't expect anything less, but this is all top flight. The finish on it, it's got some nice anodization. I mean, all the machining is impeccable, very nicely done. And I like the red that they've used for these, what I'm going to call a secondary lever. Really, it's the spring tensioning lever for the main lever, which is right here. Now this lever goes all the way through this housing, and you can see the pin that it's actually swiveling on. And you can also see that this back plate with the Ascher Racing logo on it is part of this. So they're all one piece. You can see there when I activate it. And these red arms up here with the magnets in them are actually performing a return spring function. If I do it on the other side, you can see how that works. And the microphone is probably amplifying the clicking noise here a bit more than it really is. But once I'm driving, you'll be able to hear it from a different angle, so that might be a little better. But yeah, it's making a clicking noise, and it's all aluminum and steel in here, so yeah, it is going to make some noise. So if you need a silent shifter, this is not going to be the one for you, obviously. Right, so you can see how it's working. And we've got some couple of screws on the housing here, which actually, the screws that are going into the little switches. Give me a little pointer here, and get a little closer look at those. You should be able to see a little yellow tab here. Right about, where is it? Down there. There it is. And of course, as we actuate the shifter, that back plate comes down and hits it. And of course, we have one on both sides. And again, nicely done with these recessed screws in here. Everything nice and flush looking. And really, the assembly here is pretty simple, but ingenious at the same time, the way this is working. Now, these levers themselves, the return spring levers that I'm going to call them, then the main lever, I believe they're all rotating on the same pin right here. And all they're doing is these red levers only get pushed a very minimal distance rather, before they're stopped. And the stop function is performed by this little screw in here. There's a set screw. And you should be able to see it right. Let's see it better over on this side. But the set screw is right in there. And you can see the hole here where you adjust the set screw. Now this is probably adjusted during assembly and adjusted where it needs to be. You could probably back that screw out a bit, I'm thinking. And you can see it on both sides there, I think, in that shot. But it's black, so it's hard to see. And you could get a little more travel out of it, but really, if you look here, I don't think you can, because when we push down on here, you see how close that plate is getting to this main housing here? But it's doing its job. It's pushing that switch button down. But yeah, I don't think you would want it making solid contact there, and that's what that stop is doing. It's keeping it just above the level of this housing here when that gets activated. So yeah, I think you would leave that alone. I wouldn't mess with that. Right, so there's one more thing. This little pin here in the main lever, see that silver pin? It's running down through in between these two red return spring levers. At least that's what I'm calling them. I'm sure they're called something else. But let me see if we can get a good look at that in there. And here you can actually see it. And you can see the pin is actually covered with, I don't know if that's actually a roller there, that black piece, or if it's just a piece of some kind of a nylon or whatever to just keep the metal from hitting against metal, kind of an isolator, if you will. But what that does, obviously, is because it's attached right here into this lever, when we move that lever, that pole there, or that pin, pushes against whichever lever that we're using. Not leather, lever. So, yeah, very cool design there. Very, like I said, pretty ingenious and simple at the same time, and just gets the job done. It looks like it's going to be a very robust design. Probably get a very long life cycle out of this thing, the way it's built. And of course, just like most of things, or all things I've ever seen from Ascher Racing, yeah, I wouldn't expect anything less. Very well done. And yeah, not a whole lot to this when you think about it. Of course, there was a whole lot that went into the design and production of it, but yeah, it just does what it's supposed to do. And that's push or pull and hit a switch and send the signal through the wire. Now, this is nicely done on the wire. He's got some shrink tubing here on the front where it goes into the actual housing, and we've got this braided sheathing. It's kind of a slick feeling sheathing that we see like in computer power supplies and things like that. And again, another piece of shrink wrap up here. Then we've got the 4 wires coming out, 2 for each switch, and female connectors. And you can see there's a red and a black and a white and a green. And I believe the white and the black, I know the black's ground for the red pair, but I believe it's the white one that's going to be the ground for the other pair. Could be wrong, but we'll see once we get this thing connected. One thing to note about this, the reason we're seeing this instead of a USB end on this is not a USB controller switch. In other words, there's no USB controller in here. So you have to provide your own conversion from the signals coming from the switches to USB so the computer can see them. Right. So if you have a Fanatic, however, that's not a big issue because you can just plug it right into the Fanatic. And when you're ordering this, first off, when you order this shifter alone, it doesn't come with the brackets. It does come with a paddle, and you do have a choice of paddles. And we'll look at those right now. You've got a short one and a long one, right? The long one, let's see, this is 198 millimeters. Might as well say it's 200 millimeter. And this one's 159. I guess I could go ahead and call that 160. Again, very nicely done carbon fiber here. There's no faults or rips or tears in the carbon that's inside of this weave anywhere. And again, sometimes I've gotten carbon fiber where I see some of the weave is just a little bit out of sorts, if you will. It doesn't follow the grain like it should. But not here. It's all done quite well, as you might expect. Now, the shorter one is actually 4 mil thick, and the bigger one is actually 5 mil, which makes sense because you would need it to be thicker. You see the differences there. 4 mil obviously be on the bottom. Because once we have a thicker, or rather a longer lever, you can see the short one here, once we're actually trying to shift way up here on the tip, we need a thicker material so it won't flex at all. There's going to be no flex whatsoever in this setup. Once we have it mounted, I guarantee you no flex whatever. It's just going to be a very nice solid shifting experience rather. Typical again of what you get from Ascher Racing and their well-known and famous magnetic shifters that they've been making for quite some time now. Right, so that's really all you get. And you do get obviously this, which is a little pack of screws for mounting your lever to the actual shifter housing here, the shifter lever there. You get your paddle. Now, we've got some spacers in here, which I'm going to use just for the heck of it, and I can always take them out easy enough. We got longer screws and shorter screws in here, and we'll see that a little bit closer when we actually assemble this together. And we'll get to that segment later on. Right, so that's all you get. And again, making your choice between the paddles is a €10 difference. So it's 199 euros for the shorter paddle, 209 for the longer paddle. I went with a longer paddle. Right, so now we're going to have to get a way to mount this. Now you can mount this yourself. As you can see on this housing here, and I meant to show you that, there are some holes here providing for the mounting, and they're actually drilled and tapped, so you can put some screws in. And there is a screw package that comes when you get your bracketry, but you can provide your own. These look like they're 3 or 4 mil screws, and I think there's 3, and there might even be a 5 in there because of the different type of screwing that we're going to be doing as far as the bracket. Now, when you order your bracket, first off, you're going to get these. These are the standard pieces. And you got to know what you want when you order your bracket. These standard pieces, first off, they fit like this. Let's see, get the straight part with the back, this little straight edge. You can see it's got a little angle cut to it. And we got some slots here so we can actually adjust the angle of the shifter up to 30 degrees, actually, pretty cool. And we're going to actually mount it like this, and there's a spacer that goes under here. And the two holes will have a screw here and a screw here, right? So that allows us to actually, when it's loosened, to actually swing this shifter out. So it's adjustable as far as that angle. And we'll see that once we get it all assembled. But yeah, you're going to have to know or have a general idea of how far out you need this shifter assembly to be based on how far out your steering wheel is sticking from your actual motor housing, right? So your motor base is going to determine how far out you're going to need these brackets to be. Now, there's several selections here. You do get the standards with the bracket kit, and they are, I believe, 53 mil or something. Let's see, what did I do with my little thing there? I have my little metric ruler over here. See if I can source it again. There it is. So yeah, that's 58, it looks like. Go ahead and show that you guys can see. It looks like just a hair over 58 mil. Let's get you so you can see the edge of it. So 58 mil from whichever base plate that you're going to be attaching this to. Okay, so you get these little plates too, depending on what you want to use it with. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about these in a minute. So that's 58 millimeters standard. Now they have a plus 25, which is this, which adds 25 millimeters to that length. They've got a plus 55, which adds another 55 mils to the existing length. And then we got the super long plus 85. Now the plus 85 plus 58, if you want to do the math, but I'm just going to go ahead and put my ruler on it. So we have a length available to us, a max length that looks like 144. You can see it right there. So 144 long, and you're going to have to figure out how far from your motor base or wheel base you want this to be mounted to get it in the right vicinity of the rim. So when you're doing your pushing and your pulling on that shifter, you want to be able to have it in the right place. Even though there is some adjustability here in the brackets themselves, I would say there's another, let's see, from end to end here, and we'll just use this long slot here. That looks like about 13 mil. Yeah. So that slot is 13 millimeters long. So we can move that back and forth a bit. And if we move it all the way forward, that's why you see two of these slots here. If we move it all the way forward or backward, then the screw will go into the prospective slot that will still allow it to turn like it needs to. So we do have a little bit of adjustment there, but that's more of a fine-tuning adjustment. So yeah, you have to be mindful about what setup you have and how far you want this thing to be sticking out from your wheelbase. And I went with the longest ones, and I'll see how that works. I may have to change the extension, or the extender rather, on my wheel shaft to make this thing work. Just like anything else though, when we're changing things on our rigs, there's always, we think we know exactly what needs to be done, but then usually when we're actually doing it, there's a couple little things that we have to modify a little bit to make it work. So I'm sure the same thing is going to apply here. So yeah, you get these brackets here, and these brackets, I meant to show you that, have two holes in the back that actually have threads tapped into them. Guess how well that's going to show up, but anyway, it's got threads in it, and this is actually going to go underneath depending on the bracket you have here. Now this is the actual bracket that mounts up on the wheelbase. This one is for a Kollmorgen AKM 5 series, a Lens, or a Midge, so it'll fit any of those. And the top one here is for the Midge because it's got a bigger spacing on it for mounting, and the bottom one here is for either the Lens or the Kollmorgen AKM 5 series. This is for the Fanatic CSW. All right. And we have two of them obviously on the top and bottom. That would be like the bottom one, and this would be the top one. Let's see, get this oriented properly. Okay, so we got the bottom one and the top one like this. There we go. So that's the way they would be sitting. And of course our bolts would be holding, and there's enough space in between here to get both the top and bottom one of these plates bolted to it, right? And of course you see multiple positions here, so you can move this in and out. Or we might as well use the bracket for that, because that's what we'll be moving. So we can take this bracket and move it one way or the other. So that does give us adjustment for the wheel width. However, it is recommended by Ascher Racing that you use a wheel that is 300 millimeters or larger. Like this one here. This is about a 320. So, and that's the one I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using these brackets because I'm going to be using on my Kollmorgen AKM. Let's see, it's the 54G. I'll be using that one. But this is for the CSW, but I did put this up on my CSL, the Fanatic CSL wheelbase, and it seemed to fit also the same thing. So I'm pretty sure it'll fit both the CSL and the CSW. Right, what else do we want to talk about here? Once we get our brackets and everything hooked up, we got, again, the hardware. We'll get to that when we're doing it. Oh yes, back to the USB issue. We get different cables. First off, if you've got a Fanatic and you're going to be using this shifter on a Fanatic, no big deal. You simply use this cable, and you have to order which cable you want when you order your bracket kit. So depending on your application is going to be depending on which cable you get. This is the Fanatic, which has the familiar RJ12 right here. And we have two pairs of male connectors here. And these male connectors are going to go to the shifter cable, which is the female, and simply plug them in. Now once I have my setup finalized, I might actually take some shrink wrap and put around this, and just to keep them from ever coming apart, maybe. Or maybe not. It depends on how well they're sticking together. But you can see that each one of these cables, and I'll show you the others in a minute here, also are color coded just like this cable is, so it's going to be very easy to plug them into the right plugs and not screw it up. Right, so that's the RJ12 if you're running the Fanatic, and of course you would just plug this into an empty shifter hole in the back. Shifter 2 probably is what they say on their website to plug this into, so no big deal. Plug it into here and then plug it into your wheelbase. You're good to go. Right, if you don't have that though, then you're going to need something else. Now if you're running OSW, they got you covered also, and this is a 2-meter long cable, very nicely done, and the terminations are very nice on this also. This has got the SimuCube, and this is for SimuCube only, by the way, the RJ45 for the SimuCube, and it's using, looks like 3 wires are coming out of there in the RJ45 clip. And then on the other side we have, just like the other one, the 2 pairs of male pins that are going to go into the other side of our shifter. Now this SimuCube is going to be, you have to plug it in the 2 leftmost plugs, the top and bottom, one of those 2. If you saw my Penguin RC review, then you could use that as a reference, or I'll just show you a little picture of the SimuCube right here. Yeah, and that's, you can see it, you plug it in either the top or bottom left, it should work. Right, so SimuCube is taken care of by ordering the SimuCube cable. Now, what if you don't have SimuCube, you don't have a Fanatic? What are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to find a peripheral that you're using on your simulator that has a USB conversion board on it. And I have a few of those. It could be a shifter, it could be pedals, and I'm probably going to use the pedal ones for mine. And I'm going to show you guys a shot here. I've got 2 sets of pedals. Depending on which ones I'm using is which one I'll obviously be plugging into. Here's the shot of the HPPs, and you can see the Bodner board there. That is an 836 Bodner board. You can see the pins. I'll get a close-up here, and then you can see the pins, and you just simply plug this into the female plugs into those pins and get your ground and your signal orientation configured properly, and then you should be good to go. It'll just be able to go in and use that USB, and the PC will see the inputs from the shifter. Also on my Wave Italy, it's also using an 836 board, and here's a close-up of the board, and the same deal. I'll just plug these in, and yeah, off to the races. So yeah, we've got a cable that should cure most of your situation. Again, you're going to have some way to convert these signals to USB. And if you think about it, it's such a compact unit. Yeah, squeezing a little teensy board or something in there, and then in the wiring and stuff, and then putting a USB port. Yeah, it's probably not that doable, especially with how compact this is. I was thinking that when I was looking at it, going, well, is there any way they could have gotten something in there? Because you got this big shaft running through here, the housing on both sides, and there's 2 switches on each side that are taking up space. So, yeah, that's probably the only way you could go with this. So, what else we need to cover? I think that's it. There is one more thing, yes. Let's talk a little bit real quickly about the force of the shift here. Right now I've got the thin magnets in. You can get up from 5 Newton meters, it says, up to a total of 15 Newton meters of force out of the magnets that come with, that you can get with this shifter. I've got the thin ones in here, 2 thin ones, so that should be the 5 Newton meter. Now, you can actually change the adjustment or the pull of the magnets by putting in these other magnets. And these are big thick ones here. I imagine that'd be the 15 Newton meter if you have both of those in. And you have these middle or medium ones, I'll call them. But you can also mix and match. So on their site, they're actually saying you have 6 different magnet combinations available to you, like 300% of range of feel on the shift, which is very cool. And it's true. If I put one of these in fact, let's do that. Let's go and pull these 2 guys apart. And right now, I can feel that it's a pretty easy click. Doesn't take much effort with the thin magnets in it. But we got to figure out a way to get these magnets out. And I thought the easiest way would be to just rock. Let me do it this way. Use my finger on the bottom plate and just squeeze the housing together. And you want to get this apart, or at least separated from the other magnet, because that's going to help you remove the magnet, obviously. But I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to try to really get this lever out. There we go. Yeah, that works like a champ. Get my fingers on this to hold it. And this is just like a little nylon toothpick I use for different things. And you can see how far I have that pried open. You better look there. But still, the magnet's not falling out. But no big deal. I just take one of these magnets, the medium ones, and I should be able to pull it out with that. And there you go. And there they go. I'm real careful with these magnets because one of them, a set of these magnets almost took my fingertip off one time. But there you go. You can see the thinner ones on there now with the medium one. Right, so we'll put that aside. Now what I'll do is just go ahead and take one of the medium ones and put it back in there. Pull it out, and there we go. You see I have a medium one kind of sticking out there, and on the other side you can see the thin one. Now with that combination, yeah, it's definitely stiffer on the shift. And of course, you would just keep going up in progression on your magnets. I would put the other medium one on the other side, take the thinner one out, and of course it would make it even harder to shift, so forth and so on, until we worked our way up to the full 15 Newton meter, which would be both of these guys, I would imagine. Yeah. So, easy enough to do as far as changing the magnets out, and I just want to go over that real quick so you guys can see how that is done. Or at least how I do it, and I think that's probably one of the easiest ways to get it done. What we'll do next is go ahead and get to the assembly portion of the video. And first what we'll do is we'll assemble the bracketry that I'm going to use to the shifter and the paddle shifter itself. And then we'll go over to the rig where I have my Cole Morgan mounted and figure out what we're going to do from that point. But first we'll come back and just get everything assembled to the shifter itself and see how that looks. Right, so now let's go ahead and get our brackets assembled on this shifter unit. Very simple, really, not much to it. There's some directions, obviously, that come with your kit that are pretty straightforward, and yeah, you shouldn't have any problems doing this. To attach these actual brackets to the shifter, this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead and attach these first to the actual shifter housings. And you saw that in an earlier segment, how we got 2 holes here. We got one there and one there. They're already threaded, and we're going to be using some screws and this spacer. So the spacer's got a little notch in it, so we're going to be using the spacer. The notch will be facing towards the shaft in there. So that obviously is put there so it clears that shaft. Very nice. Right, so we're going to be using these thin screws. You do get 2 different screws here. You get a longer thin one and a shorter thick one. And they're flanged units. This is a 3 mil and this is a 2.5 mil. We use the thin ones to attach the brackets to the actual shifter itself. And I'm going to have the wire coming out of the bottom of the shifter, so that's just what I'm keeping in mind as I put this together. And what I'm going to do is, by the way, this straight edge of this bracket, see how it's curved here? You want the straight edge to go along with this bottom, the back piece rather, that's straight. So it's sitting like that. You can see I'm using a pretty long one here, so yeah, that's what I have to use, so it is what it is. I'm going to go ahead and try to put the front one in first. So we'll go ahead and put this long screw through that and the spacer, get it lined up with the threads, and get it hand started. It should go in rather easily, and it does. Nothing like precision hardware to work with. And then we'll go ahead and get our back one, put that in. And this is actually, the smaller ones are 2.5 mil. I just happen to have my 2.5 mil wrench. I'm just going to roll this on here and snug it up a little bit. And this also, while I'm doing this, I'm going to show you the adjustments. This, I forget what it was, 13 mil or so of adjustment we have going frontwards and backwards, so we can fine tune how we want this to line up. And because it's going to be sitting like this looking at me, so if you're looking at this from the video, then your paddle will be over here like this. And this allows us to actually orientate or turn this shifter towards the actual steering shaft of the motor, which will help us fine-tune it once again to the angle and to the distance that we need. So I kind of like that. It's very cool that they thought that up. And really there's no in-between here. As you can see, it because of the way these slots are cut, you either all the way to the front or you're all the way to the back. Right, simple enough. So I'm just going to kind of snug this up a little bit, because obviously I'm going to be adjusting this once I get it over there to the rig. And the spacer also is thick enough. See how this wire is going to bend? The wire is going to be bent over like that once the plate's attached. So the spacer helps relieve the stress on this wire where it's coming in the housing. But you can see we've got some nice shrink wrap on there to help keep any abrasive actions down. Right, so let's go to the other side, and again we want the straight edge oriented along the back. This is going to be a little trickier because I'm going to have some spring tension with this cable springing back on me when I put it on. So I suppose the best way to go about this is getting the front one in again first, get it in line with the hole, get it in a little bit, and then we'll swing it around and go for the back one. And spacer wants to move around a little. That's okay. It's really pretty easy. In fact, I was almost not going to show this, but you know, because I'm having to put pressure on this wire to get this to go down, then I figured it was probably worth showing it. And then we'll see what the wire looks like once we get it all the way down. Just spin them down real quick. It doesn't look like I'm on the thread there, does it? See what I'm looking at here. Okay, I got it now. See, the actual wire itself, I might have to take it and rotate it over this way a little bit because it was blocking this being able to swing over far enough to engage the threads. So let me show you this way. So I had to take the wire, instead of being straight, you gotta kind of bend it out of the way a little bit there. Very gently though, we don't want to do anything with too much force, and that allows us to get the screw going down. Right, and again, when we're turning this, let's go ahead and loosen this just a little. When I'm turning this for the angle, obviously the wire's going to have to move too when we're doing that. Actually, I got it too tight on the bottom here now, so it's not going to work. Hang on, I'll snug those up just a little bit too much. There we go. There we go. So the bracket's going to be on like this, and then we'll be able to make our changes as far as the swivel there. See, nice little setup actually. This is well thought out. So I'll go ahead and snug these up just a little bit, and I'm going to go all the way out to start with, but we'll see once we get there how far I need to be. And again, this is nice because we can fine-tune the distance to suit our needs. Right, so that's all there is to that. Now the brackets themselves, two ways to do this, and probably the way I'm going to do it is go ahead and attach these brackets so I got a support. So I'm just supporting the brackets as I'm trying to hold the whole assembly up there and to run the bolts through from my Kollmorgen. I have to take one bolt out at a time out of my motor mount bracket that's on my P1 rig over there, and then put the bolt in and then tighten it down or snug it up at least, and then do the same thing for the other bracket that's going to go on top. And if I have this assembled, I can kind of, at least that's the idea, if I have this already assembled, I can kind of hold it there while, if this is already stuck on here, and keep everything in one place where I'm trying to manipulate the bolt. That's the idea anyway. So let me do that. And again, these brackets have the threaded holes on the back, and I'm not sure where this is going to end up landing, so I'm going to put it at the extreme outer holes at first. Actually, you don't even need the bracket up here for this. Just get them started like that. And then we can bring our bracket in and do what we want to. And remember, this is a 3 mil, so I got to get the other inch. And just go ahead and snug that up a little. Easy enough. We'll flip around, do the same thing on this side. Make sure our orientation's right. It is. Actually, this feels a little flimsy when you're actually doing this part of it, but you see how long these brackets are. You would expect it that much at least. And the fact that we don't have this screws over here tightened down to the final tighten torque. Right. Put this one in as far as it'll go, and we'll just tighten her up. Easy enough. Wow. Okay, so again, that was my idea, to just kind of hold it there like that while I'm trying to get the bolt back in for the motor mount. Once I get one out, and like I said, I'll probably do the top one first, and then we have this here, and I'm going to leave this paddle off until, well, I don't know, maybe I'll put it on. Yeah, let's go ahead and put it on. I don't think it's really going to interfere with anything because the wheel will not be on. So, and also in this kit, there's 2 more washers. And I can only think that these washers are made to be put on the front of here as you're running your big bolts. M8s is what I have on mine in, and they'll actually rest on these instead of cutting into the aluminum here. Right. That's what those are for. So let's go ahead and throw the shifter on real quick. Again, very simple. I'm going to use the spacers, and you can see they're just some regular plastic spacers here. And you have a short and a long screw, depending on whether you use your spacer or not. Nice stainless units, it looks like. And just pretty simple way to do this is just stick your screw through. I'm always like to do the top one first, then my spacer goes on, and hopefully it'll screw right on. And that looks like it's a 2.5, and it is. And there goes the other spacer running away. So get the other one on, and we'll have this puppy done. So yeah, this is pretty simple, isn't it? Even Barry can do it. All right. Here we go. Snug that down. We can go ahead and snug this down pretty good, because I might be using that as a handle also when I'm trying to grab everything. But there it is. That's what it looks like in the finished project, or product, not project. And it's not totally tight, but yeah, this is what pull and push. Yeah, I kind of like that. I'm looking forward to doing this because I never used a shifter like this. And yeah, and I know they're using them in WRC Rally. A lot of guys are using these now, even though they still have a backup sequential shifter down on the transmission down there. But yeah, a lot of them guys are going to this. So, but I've always wondered about, you know, if you're turned way over here, I guess this other hand down here can hit it. So yeah, it'll still work. But we're going to find out once we have it assembled. So all we have to do now is, when we come right back, we'll actually be over at the P1 rig and taking the bolts out of, one at a time out of that Kollmorgen motor mount, and then attaching it and see where we are. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and mount this assembly up to these 2 bolts here. And because this is a Kollmorgen AKM 5 series 54G, we're going to be putting the bolts through these holes here. And these are M8 bolts, so I'm assuming that they're going to fit through this hole here. It looks like it's just going to make it. So we'll go ahead and pull those bolts out first. Now I've already got them a little bit loose, just to save me from having to crank on them to get them, break them loose basically, because I run them pretty tight when I'm actually running the rig. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take the top one out first. Now, these other two over here on the other side, they're still at full torque. So I'm not worried about taking these two out and the motor falling off or anything. Of course, I wouldn't run it like that. But for this purpose, I think it'll work just fine. So we'll go ahead and get our nut and washer off the back of this. So we'll put these down here out of the way. And we just got to take the other one off. There we go. Right, so it's easier than I thought it was going to be. Okay, got our washer and nut off the other side, and there goes our washer. Always dropping something, it seems like. Right, so now we got these off, I'm going to keep this in my hand and go ahead and put the top one in first. And I've already got a washer on this bolt, so I'm just going to slide it right through the hole. And it did come out. Remember, I have these kind of loose too, so I didn't expect it to hold it real tight there. All right, so now we can go back in to our motor hole. Put our washer back in. This can be a little bit fiddly, so I'm going to kind of put my hand up here and hold this bracket and the bolt at the same time so I can get my washer and nut on the back. All right, so now it's through the hole, and now all I have to do is get my other bolt and do the same thing on that one on the bottom. Good deal. Well, this is easier than I thought it was going to be, man. This is nice. Right. Of course, I've bolted and unbolted this motor, it seems like 10,000 times off this rig because I changed things around so much. All right, so now I'm going to take this opportunity to snug up these little holes, or the bolts, or the screws on the top here, so it doesn't go running around on me. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom one, because I really don't want to move it around. And you do have some wiggle room here. There is, as you can see, some slack in this whole assembly, which is a good thing, because to fine tune it, we're going to need some of that slack. You can see I can kind of move this around like this if I want to. And again, when you're fine tuning this thing, that's exactly what you want. So let's go ahead and snug up the top one. Should be good. I'm just going to back that off just a hair so I can still forcibly move it if I need to, like that. There we go. And really how we're going to, the final adjustment that you do on this is really going to be based on what kind of wheel you're using and how far away it is from the shifter lever itself. Right, so there we have the shifter lever, and it's, again, these two on top and bottom are still loose, so I can actually kind of fine tune the angle on this thing. See, I can actually still move it a little bit. I might have to loosen those up just a hair. But now what we want to do is put the wheel on, and this is what I'm going to use. By the way, this is a Momo Mod 88. So we'll go ahead and put it on the quick release system. Put that down. And here's another consideration. You see this lever here. Well, you saw it when I was pressing it down. Make sure you got clearance on the edge of this lever from this assembly, this shifter assembly in here, right? Because you don't want to be hitting it. So I usually clamp it down and push it forward like you would on a bicycle when you're actually using that. So you can see right away, this is a bit far out. Right, now the space itself is feeling pretty good. Now if I put this all the way back on the bracket here, what I'm going to do is, for the fine tune adjustment part of this, now that we saw this segment, I'm going to go right next to getting an overhead shot, or at least a better angle shot, so you guys can see what I'm doing, adjusting this, and see how the paddle's being adjusted in and out. Because I'm going to have to come in, I know already, and maybe play with the angle a little bit, but we're really close, which is really great, because I did some measuring beforehand and trying to get it to do right, and it looks like it's lining up pretty good. But when I come back, we'll be getting a different shot. We'll be actually looking down in this angle so we can see what's going on for these final adjustments. All right, so now we've got a better angle. We can see what I'm going to do as far as my adjustments. This is just hanging out too far. and I need it to come in. And of course we have the little slots in these two brackets here that are mounting to the motor mount that we can move this pretty easily. And I really like the way he went to the trouble of threading these plates. So all we have to do really is come into the bottom like this and just loosen them up a little bit. And loosen the top. I'm going to kind of hold it here when I loosen the top ones, just to make sure it doesn't go flying off somewhere. Now we can just slide the whole thing out and move it over one notch and put it back in. And that's looking a little better, so I'm just going to snug up these top ones and see how that looks. And how that feels. So yeah. Of course it's still jiggling because the other ones are still loose, but I think, yeah, I could still, well, I'll tell you, I'm going to try to move it over one more notch, because pulling it towards me is, I'm having to reach around it a bit, so maybe we can make that better. Like so. This is really pretty easy to do adjustments on, which is great. I mean, it's a well thought out deal here. And we'll go down to the bottom. Yeah, that's going to be better, I think. Just make sure everything, the brackets are pushed in the same amount of space. Don't want those to be off, if we can help it. There we go. So now it's just a matter of, now that we've got that part done, it's just a matter of me getting in here and adjusting where I want that to be. To do that, I'm going to have to move some wrenches here and sit down. Well, not really. I can do it over here from the side. Yeah. Okay. It's feeling pretty good. I got plenty of space to bump it with my fingers and pull it at the same time. So I think I'm just going to leave it right there. Yeah. And I'll go ahead and tighten down the top two screws first, which, and remember, those are 2.5. These guys over here were 3s. So all I got to do is lean down and get these. And I'll do a final torque down when I get in here, just to make sure everything is snug in the way it should be. Let's see how that's looking. And it's sounding a little different too now that I've got everything tightened up. Yeah. I think that's going to work out great. So, all we have to do now is plug in the cable, and really it's just a matter of plugging in the male ends, as we saw before, into these female ends, and then I'm going to run the other female ends over to the Bodner board on these Wave Italy pedals. And you can see right here, it's just a matter of plugging in both of those plugs and making sure I have my ground and my signal wire oriented properly. Simple as that. And now all we have to do is get in and drive, and we'll do that next. Okay, so here we are in iRacing in what is now called, I believe, the IRX or iRacing Rallycross Series, and I'm in the Ford Fiesta. Having some fun at Sonoma, one of my favorite rallycross tracks in iRacing. And before you guys start getting on me about how these rally cars do not use a push-pull shifter, well, I decided to use it anyway. Not only that, but I'm actually using this shifter as a regular shifter in some paddle shifted cars. So yeah, I need to stop with this blasphemous talk in here. Anyway, you can use the shifter anywhere you want to, obviously. So first off, you'll notice about the push-pull shifter is, and I used to have the sequential down where my handbrake is, was to stop myself from reaching for the sequential down on the console where it would be, and concentrate on what I'm doing the push-pull shifter. And then it's about pushing. You're not used to pushing the shifter with your hand. You're always pulling paddles on paddle shifter setups. And now we're pushing and then pulling. So it did take just a little bit, not very long really, but it did take a little bit of time for me to get fluent with doing the shifting that way. But once I was there, it felt great. And this shifter does a great job. It has a very analogish, if you will, feel to it when you're using it. It has nice audible clicks, which, by the way, can also be a detrimental trait if you are trying to race next door or next room to your significant other or whoever happens to be living in the house with you. Fortunately, at the sim racing garage, we don't have those issues. But it is not a quiet shifter. If you need something that's quiet and silent, this is not the shifter for you. Right, so again, using this in a rallycross car and not having any other paddles to use or the sequential down there was really the biggest thing to overcome. I mean, once I realized that, yeah, all my shifting is going to be right there on my right hand now, then yeah, it all came together and works fine. Having a great time driving here. I actually, if you'll notice rather, the wheel I'm using here is a Momo Mod 88, and there's no button plate on it because I didn't put one on at this time that I was using it and shooting this video because of the interference with paddle shifters paddles. So if you actually have a button plate on here, and I'll use my Super Quattro as an example, and it has the Ascher button plate on it that has a clutch and a shifter paddle on it, I could not turn the wheel because it would hit the shifter, obviously. So once I removed the paddle though, and both the clutch and the shifter paddles, then I was able to shift at will. And I did have to tweak some adjustments on the actual push-pull shifter, but I was able to get to a point where it wasn't interfering with the push-pull shifter, the button box in general, and it wasn't interfering with my shifts. So yeah, if you have a button plate with shifters on it, then I think you should be able to just take the paddles off and adjust the push-pull so it doesn't interfere. That way, when you don't want to use the push-pull, you can take it right back off, leave the brackets on your wheelbase, and it's just a matter of taking those 4 screws out, sliding it off, putting your paddles back on your button plate, and getting back into your regular paddle shifting mode, whichever cars that you use that. Right. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. It is, there's not a whole lot going on here. It's just a push-pull shifter. And it is a lot of fun to use though, and I've always been wanting to use one with, made out of some good substantial parts, not a 3D printed unit that, I've actually seen a few of those out in the wild, but something that's made with substantial aluminum, metal parts and bits and some carbon. And this is definitely the ticket as far as that's concerned. And yeah, really enjoyed using it. Again, the immersion factor goes up obviously anytime we can get something close to what they're using in the real world. In fact, I've seen some of the ones in some of the WRC cars out there, and man, I tell you, this shifter looks a lot better. It seems to be made out of better parts than some of the ones I've seen in WRC rally cars, the actual cars. So yeah, you would not be disappointed if this is the sort of thing you're looking to get, this push-pull. It's a great experience to be able to use it, and once you get familiar with it, which really not much of a learning curve, then yeah, you're right on, and it's a blast to use. Right, so you can see I'm just having a lot of fun here. Not much else to say, I think. I'm happy with this shifter, and I don't think if you get it, you would be disappointed. Obviously, this is not a shifter that is a must-have type of deal. It's just something, if you want to add the immersion to your rally driving, be it in iRacing or dirt or whatever it is that you're using for your rally, then yeah, this would be a nice addition to your cockpit, no doubt. So what we'll do next is go over to the final thoughts section, but I'll let this run a couple of minutes like I usually do. And again, if you don't want to watch the rest of this, then you can just hop over to the final thoughts, and I will see you over there. Final thoughts on the Ascher Racing push-pull rally shifter. Ever since I first saw some of the WRC rally cars using push-pull paddle shifters, I wanted to try one for myself, of course. Now, I've seen other do-it-yourself versions of push-pull shifters which look like they would work fine, but I was waiting to see if someone would come out with one that you could buy that was, well, you know, already built and use some good parts when in the build. Finally, I found it. And the fact that it comes from one of the premier sim racing hardware builders around today just makes it, well, that much better. Now, the build quality and parts used and resulting product are exactly what we have come to expect when buying hardware from Ascher Racing. Just one of those pieces of kit that shine as soon as you take it out of the box. A deceivingly simple design that delivers on performance, and I've been having a good time using mine. At first I thought there might be a bit of a learning curve when using the push-pull action, but in reality it mimics the movement of a regular sequential shifter mounted to a car's console. So once I stopped reaching for a sequential that was no longer there, it all came together with a natural analog feeling. Now, there are some considerations to be had when purchasing this unit. You will need to take some measurements where you will be mounting it. This will let you avoid getting the wrong mounting bracket when purchasing the system. And the rim you use will also determine your bracket length. I use a 4-inch extension, so I needed to get the longest or plus 85 bracket option. And you will need to make a cable selection based on what type of connection you're going to be using. Lastly, you will need to get the right base mounting bracket. Now, I like the fact that one bracket actually covers 3 different motor mounting possibilities. But I hope soon that there's going to be a mounting solution for the AccuForce motor base. On a side note, I wanted to see how difficult it would be to use a wheel sporting a button plate equipped with paddle shifters with this shifter mounted to my wheelbase. Now, here is an OMP Super Quattro wheel with one of my Ascher Racing button plates installed. You can see that with the shifter and clutch paddles attached, there is an interference with the push-pull shifter. But after removing the paddles from one side of the plate and then making some adjustments to the push-pull mounts, I was able to clear the shifter and allow unimpeded shifts. So, if you have a button plate attached to your wheel already, you should be able to dial it in for this use, I think. Now, pricing on this solution will vary with what you order. The basic shifter assembly will run you 199 euros, which includes the short shifter paddle. The longer shifter paddle will set you back in another 10 euro, so it was 209 euro for the one I got. Unless you will be fabricating your own mounting bracket, which is completely doable, you need to order the Ascher mounting bracket. And again, the configuration you need will determine the final price. The price for my setup was 49 euro, bringing the total to 258 euro. Now that included a VAT that was 41.19, I think, euro. So really the grand total was actually about 217 euros plus my shipping. Considering the build design and quality you get with this shifter, I really don't think that price is out of line. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and support the SRG by visiting our website at simracinggarage.com.